Oh, okay. I don't think that in that discussion that you actually articulated how you see this connection between literacy and democracy. And on the one hand, I can see how that could be the case. You talked, 20% literacy, there's a lot of disinformation. Well, there's a lot of disinformation with 100% literacy. So
Right.
we can't isolate that factor, right? So I, my bias, because I, my grandmother only had a first grade education and she was, probably the most beloved person in my life. My bias is that you don't have to be literate or you don't have to be educated in a sophisticated way to understand the concept of democracy. So I believe there's something else going on there.
Could be. So let me unpack it a little bit more. In a realm in which the interpretations of the Quran are dependent on the mullahs because you can't read it for yourself, then you are dependent on what the mullahs are telling you is and isn't appropriate, and you have no way to fact check for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the more moderate mullahs, of course, receive threats and death threats saying, we may not get you now, but at some point in time, the U.S. is going to leave. They told them they're going to leave. And so if you pick the side of the U.S. in your interpretation, your family, vengeance is eternal. And so it was trying to unpack the fact that when you are not able to independently triangulate what someone is telling you is or isn't the case, then you are dependent on their interpretations. And so if you have benevolent individuals, sure, you don't need it. But if you have to do it yourself, it can be exploited. And one of the things I kind of lament, and I say this both half jokingly and half serious, is I feel like the last 15 years, the US has become more like Afghanistan than the other way around. We've become more tribal. As you said, disinformation is rampant and we have actual literacy here. And so it's people not going to take the time to the actual sources and reading it for themselves and saying, no, they actually didn't say that, or that's not the whole thing. I mean, I remind people that most disinformation is effective when it does 2 out of 3 things. When courts, they tell you to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Most disinformation does 2 out of the 3, and then it gets loosey-goosey on the third thing. And so it was just that if we were going to bring reason to why we were there and reason to what we were doing, as opposed to just fighting an all-out war, I did not see the conditions present in which the interpretations would be more of a moderate interpretation versus extremism. And I think we've become, and again, I think the US has become more like Afghanistan, to your point, and yet we still can read. We're just not taking the time to see the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we're choosing our mullahs.
or metaphorical. And